Welcome to Coast Vue, the show that every single day celebrates the men and women who are making coastal Mississippi, and Mississippi for that matter, such a great place to live, work, and play. Hope you're having a great day. You know, we talk I say a little. We actually, from time to time, talk a lot about entrepreneurship from a wide variety of guests, looking at it from a bunch of different points of view. Probably the one that I've enjoyed the most, if you look over a series of conversations, it's been with my friend Mark Henderson, who owns Lazy Magnolia with his wife, the first brewery in Mississippi, and also owns a company called Log Linear Group. And has some very sophisticated patents as it relates to radar technology. And he's just really a great guy to talk about entrepreneurship. I'm going to talk to you about a new partnership that SuperTalk Mississippi Media News is developing with Mark. And before we do that, let me bring him into the conversation. And first, just say good morning to you, my friend. How you doing?
I'm doing great, Ricky. Good to be back with you.
Good to see you too, my friend. So, look, the partnership is terrific. The fact that we're going to have you writing regular columns about entrepreneurship that will be posted at SuperTalk Mississippi News. And of course, I've told people, you can go to supertalk.fm. You can see that online. When you actually go to supertalk.fm, what you'll immediately get is a window that gives you the ability to sign up for the newsletter. I really encourage people to sign up for the newsletter. The SuperTalk Mississippi News team is doing a terrific job of capturing news across the state of Mississippi. And then they feed that back into 51 radio stations across the state of Mississippi. Think about that. The 26 radio stations that are part of the SuperTalk Mississippi media family, and then 25 additional radio stations. So when you hear SuperTalk Mississippi News on this channel or other channels like WCPR and others here in coastal Mississippi, it's coming through that effort. And when news happens in coastal Mississippi that's relevant to the rest of the state, it then goes to 51 radio stations across the state. It's also online at supertalk.fm. You can also sign up for the app. They have a great app online that gives you access to the shows, and you can listen to the radio programs across the state of Mississippi by using the app. You can listen to the shows by just going to the supertalk.fm page as well. You can watch SuperTalk TV there. That's in a partnership in the state. You can watch the supertalk.fm. Then you can, SuperTalk TV. Then you can go to Facebook or YouTube or your favorite podcast and listen to these channels. The bottom line is that SuperTalk is a multimedia organization, very entrepreneurial, I might add. That's what entrepreneurial companies do. They continue to innovate and adopt new technologies and all that. And Mark's going to be writing a column on entrepreneurship, and man, he's in a really good position to do that. And I'm looking forward to reading. You have read your first column, which will be published in the next day or two. And man, you did a great job. But it's going to be exciting. It's fun for you to be writing, isn't it?
You know, it's been a long time since I've done that. When I took a class in English lit way back when, right? And one of the things that professor made me do was write every day. She required a journal. Didn't care what you wrote about, but you had to write. And says, I'm a little out of practice, but I mean, the reality is that Les and I gathered a lot of great experience over the years, and there's really only two ways to get experience. You can get it the hard way, or you can get it from someone else's hard way. And if we could share some of that with the people of Mississippi and inspire some, the next generation of entrepreneurs. I'm getting a little long in the tooth. I think the first time we ever talked, I didn't have any gray hair in my beard, and that is no longer the case. So,
oh man, and you also had long hair. For people who are watching on YouTube and Facebook, you see a very clean cut Mark Henderson, but there was a time there when you had pretty long hair, didn't you?
I did. I had it about halfway down my back, but that's I had run into Joanne Nicely, who does Pink Hearts Fund, and she reached up one day and ran her fingers through my hair when I was at an event, and I was like, Joanne, I'm married. And she's like, oh, but you have nice hair.
Joanne is a dear friend. In fact, I tell you, this has been a long time ago. This is like the early 80s. She dated a young man, and I dated his sister, and at the same time. So this was for 3 or 4 years. It was a long friendship, and she cut my hair for many, many, many years. And of course, when I moved over to Biloxi, it was I had to, because she's in Long Beach. It was a little bit harder to get to her But she's been on the show many times. In fact, she's coming up actually pretty soon here to talk about her upcoming fundraiser, but she's really dedicated. But look, I'm lucky to have any hair. Not having hair is not in my family, and I've got thin hair, but I've got hair, thank God. If I had your hair, I'd be wearing it down to my shoulders, man. Because I bet she enjoyed rubbing her hands to your. She probably said that. Look, this is going to be some great hair for somebody who has cancer and going through treatment, and that's what it was all about, isn't it?
It's 100%. So that's exactly she did that. And I've donated my hair 3 times now, I think.
Yeah.
So it takes several years to grow out like that, and then you donate it, and you know that you're doing something good in the community. And we would have events for her as well, and raise enough money to make sure that that hair got turned into real wigs for real people.
Yeah, I'm just so proud of what she's done. She took her, Robin Roberts and her mother often said that you got to make your mess your message. And I think that in Joanne's case with breast cancer, she's done that. She's made her mess her message, and she's living by example day in and day out, helping women with prosthetics and hair and all the other stuff that challenges women when they have to go through chemotherapy and radiation therapy and all of that. So good. She's doing such good work. Hey, listen, one of the things I did, I pulled up the Oxford definition of entrepreneurship. And, I was just curious. But then when I read it, it seemed so simple that I thought maybe I'll share it with you. And I just want to get your reaction to this because it's all so simple. And, again, this is just one sentence, and it's easy. So here it is. And just give me your reaction. Okay, the definition of entrepreneurship. The activity of setting up a business or businesses, taking on financial risk in the hope of profit. That's all there is to it, isn't it? What's your reaction to that definition?
So hope is an absolutely the right word. And I had a good friend who told me on more than one occasion, hope is not a plan. And I would say that we absolutely make all the plans. Successful entrepreneurs always have a plan. It may change, but you got to start someplace, right? And you got to focus in on that, and you got to do it. But at the end of the day, it's hope. Because you don't know how it's going to end, right? I mean, you've got a vision for this thing. You don't know which way it's going to go exactly. You think it wants to go this way, and this is where you're going to find the most value. And, I consider any business. I mean, at the end of the day, we're all in business. We're in business for ourselves every day. And we're just trying to create the most value we can. And entrepreneurship is one of those where you say, hey, I got this crazy idea. Maybe there's a place for it in the world, but you don't know.
Yeah, you don't know. And actually, we're going to talk a little bit about that because one of the things that you wrote about that, in fact, we'll go to that here in just a second, is I think really applicable. But hey, listen, when I think about hope, when I read that, as you know, later in my career, I was involved in some pretty dramatic and transformative digital media efforts. Hope to me was certainly you were hoping for success, but what hope did for me is it gave me dogged determination, because hope in and of itself is not actionable. Hope is sort of a sense that vision may become a reality, but dogged determination is overcoming adversity and doing what you got to do to make sure that you're doing what's necessary to achieve success. And so you really, it's a long list of attributes that are necessary to be successful at the end of the day. That is for sure. Hey, listen, before we go, we'll go to this part a minute ago that I mentioned, that this whole notion of something you wrote that I think is really important. But before I share that, why don't you remind people about your 2 businesses?
Yeah. So, Leslie and I started Lazy Magnolia 20 years ago. Actually, this year, 20, that's crazy to think about. We were 29-year-old punks with this view that we were going to somehow change the world and bring craft beer to the state of Mississippi. We got told no a million times. That people said, well, that'll never sell here, that, you don't have the skills to do that. You don't, no one will ever buy your products. It's illegal in the state of Mississippi. And, you talk about dogged determination, right? I mean, it's just you take each one of those challenges and you hammer away at it until you get past the no and you find your yes. And then, a little bit later, I started an engineering firm called Log Linear Group. with an idea. I had access to a customer who I knew had a need, and I had a view of how to do that. I worked for a company at that time and tried to convince them that it was a need that needed to be, met, and they refused to do it. And so we created this entire operation, a group of people to go and build this thing that could not be built. And once again, right, we get to the other end of that, and we're successful.
Well, when we come back on the other side, we'll zero in a little bit more on Lazy Magnolia and Log Linear Group, so you can have a true appreciation for the numerous iterations these companies have gone to. And then we'll talk about some of the ideas that he has that he'll be writing about in the coming months. Really excited about this partnership between SuperTalk Mississippi News and entrepreneur Mark Henderson. We'll see you after this. Welcome back to Coast Vue. I have my friend Mark Henderson, who's an entrepreneur. He and his wife started Lazy Magnolia now over 20 years ago, which is amazing to me to think about that. And then he has a company called Log Linear Group. And we'll talk a little bit more about Log Linear Group and this notion of an idea that others can't see. And it made me think about it. Again, I had access to a first column that he wrote for this new effort, this partnership between the two of us, where he's going to be writing a column about entrepreneurship. And here's what Mark wrote. Steve Jobs said, a lot of times people don't know what they want until you show it to them. And Mark goes on to say, in my mind, this is true artistry of entrepreneurship. Most people can only describe what they want in terms of other things they've already seen. Entrepreneurs need a clear vision, and he puts in parentheses, and thick skin. That vision may be so alien that everyone tells them it's the worst idea they've ever heard of until they see the result. But that is so true, isn't it? Here you are. You don't have Log Linear Group yet. You're working for a company. You see someone who needs something. You feel like you had the solution. You can't get your existing company to see that. That's really not unusual, man. This happens probably every single day. And whether someone sort of got the tenacity, the dogged determination, the capabilities, the financing, and the long list of other things that's necessary to then break away and take that idea and go do something with it. In your case, you figured it out too, didn't you?
I did. And it's an interesting aspect of that whole process, right? Is that, companies oftentimes they take their best and their brightest, and they're locked into this kind of very rigid stovepipe of the way they operate. And, some of the best companies operate their own skunk works inside their own businesses in order to disrupt the business that they have. I mean, if you think about people that have existing businesses that are successful, management goes, hey, look, whatever you do, just don't screw this up.
Yeah.
And you've been part of that transformational change from within, where the business changes and that old way just won't do it anymore. And then you gotta have something, right?
Yeah, for people who haven't heard the word skunk work, I'm reminded. Let's see, I'm trying to think. In search of excellence, something like that. In those days, that word came about. But essentially, what he's talking about is when an effort inside a company just sort of crops up, and they put some people around it, and they do it. It's not super organized. It's just putting some of the best and brightest together and say, flesh that idea and see what happens. Sometimes these quote unquote skunk works become an answer to literally transforming a company, or that sometimes they become new products and they become companies in and of themselves. But yeah, really important work. I mean, companies that are willing to do that. I'm reminded of what Andy Grove said once. Andy Grove from
Intel, wasn't it?
Intel, of course. Yeah, he said, "Eat your young before someone else does."
That's right.
Putting these, these skunk works in place to say, put us out of business, because if they could, because that's what the competitors are doing.
That's right. That's right.
So,
and if a company doesn't do that, right, then they actually then free people like me up to go and disrupt their business. And am I going to disrupt their business? Maybe, maybe not, but I could. And if you've got a long-established business and someone like me shows up and disrupts everything that you've ever worked for and completely supplants it, then you have lost.
Yeah.
And the United States was built fundamentally on this idea of constant change. And so some businesses, some people, some places, they embrace it and some don't.
Hey, so what was the solution? What was that idea that you had that kicked off Log Linear Group?
So the fundamental idea was at the time I worked for a company called Kinetic North America, and we had a product line for measuring winds. What we do is we'd take a GPS sonde, a little widget, about yay big, and throw it out of the back of an airplane, and it would track its position and relay that back to the aircraft and map out the wind field. And I had this crazy idea that maybe, just maybe, that could be done with radar. And everybody told me that I was absolutely insane, that there was no way that would possibly work, that if radar could see the wind, then no one would ever be able to see airplanes, flying around in the skies and stuff like that. And I actually had read a couple of papers from a group out of Kansas, of all places. And they had this kind of interesting idea, and I ran with it. And I mocked something up out of, basically toaster parts, and demonstrated to myself. I said, no, really, I think this will work. And then the company at that point said, no, we're not interested in doing that. And I said, well, tell you what, I'll split off on my own and do it. And they're like, more power to you, Mark. And the net result was absolutely phenomenal. It was a very long project in the making. Took about a decade to do. Millions of dollars went into it, and we built a radar that could see the wind, and it's pretty amazing that you can do that. Now, though it's not, a lot of people will be like, "Oh, you had this great idea, and it was all about the idea," and you and I both know it's not about the ideas. Ideas are cheap. A million people have a million good ideas. At the end of the day, it's about the blood, sweat, and tears of, can you actually make it? And the number of times that I beat my head against the wall going, I cannot figure this out. I do not know why this is not working. But reading papers and studying and learning the things that I did not know and checking the technologies and, really working through all the details. It takes all of that to win.
Yeah. Well, you always fascinated me because you had sort of this engineering side of you, being at an early age and very engaged in science and math. And then your mother, really encouraged you to do this art side of you. So, people think of, some people are right brain people, some people are left brain people. Every now and then you find somebody who's right and a left brain people. So for an entrepreneur, that's a great mix because on one hand, you can be creative and innovative, think out of the box, see pictures of things. And then from an engineering point of view, start to paint, and calculate literally how I'm going to make that picture a reality, whether it be in programming or whatever it might be. But it's a unique mix. And it's helped you be really successful in that realm of Log Linear Group, hasn't it?
So yes, and you hit on a very important concept, which is the arts. So Leslie and I are both raising our children deeply engaged in the arts, and our view is that the math and the science, those things are going to come. But what you have to encourage at a very young age, right, is all the arts, the music and the language and the reading and all of those things. And what I learned over the years is that real art, and there are people who are hacks in the art community, right? The people who put up blank canvases, and call it art. And I go, no, that's not art. I can appreciate a statement, but you're really a publisher, you're not doing art, right? But a true artist understands their media. What they do is they study the media, the thing that they're building their art out of, so well that they can create anything that they can imagine. That's what an artist is. Yeah. And so art by itself encompasses both this very, technical, how does paint mix, right? How do you get these colors? How do you get impasta techniques on a canvas, right? How do these things happen? And that very clear vision of where are you headed? What is it that you want to create that no one has ever seen?
What I don't know if it was in your first column that you wrote or in subsequent columns, but this whole notion, I think it was the first column because it was this notion of people want to be their own boss, and people who want to be their own boss, if that's your compelling reason for wanting to be an entrepreneur, then you probably ought to bail out now because when you're like, I haven't been an entrepreneur true to the sense of what an entrepreneur is, but I have been an entrepreneur inside a major corporation where I'm leading major change efforts, et cetera. I know what it looks like to feel alone, with an idea and in a corporate change effort that others are having a hard time sort of buying into, et cetera. And the point is, when you're the CEO of a company or you're an entrepreneur, the one driving, fundraising and developing and having to make customers happy and all that, that it is, people say it's lonely at the top, and that's certainly true. It is lonely at the top. But the other thing is, everybody's your boss. Every single body is your boss. If you don't look at your employees as your boss, but the reality is, without them, you're toast. And your investors are your boss. And again, the higher up you go, the harder you fall, because there's tremendous responsibility. So if people want to be their own boss, that's not a really good reason to want to be an entrepreneur, is it?
It's not. And I like your analogy of the entrepreneur within. And it's a thing that I wish more businesses actually engaged in, right? Is this idea that, and it's really from both sides. It's both from the business point of view, but also from the people point of view, right? Is if people came to work every day and said, hey, look, you know what? How do I do a better job? How do I grow this thing up more than anybody could ever do? If every employer comes to work every day and says, hey, look, I want to do the best that I can by my employees. And if every employee comes to work every day and says, I want to do the best that I can for this business, that's a race to the top.
It is. Hey, listen, when we come back, we'll continue our conversation with Mark Henderson, entrepreneur with Lazy Magnolia and Log Linear Group, who's going to be writing a column for SuperTalk Mississippi News about entrepreneurship. And we'll just continue the conversation. We'll see you after this break. Welcome back to Coast Vue. I have my friend Mark Henderson from Lazy Magnolia and Log Linear Group. He's an entrepreneur here in coastal Mississippi and someone I really admire. Just enjoy spending time with him because he's a good dude, cares a lot about this community, and he's going to be writing a column about entrepreneurship for SuperTalk Mississippi News that I suspect will build a head of steam over time as young entrepreneurs, seasoned entrepreneurs get to hear his advice, because as you pointed out, you can learn it through the school of really, really, really hard knocks, or you can learn from somebody who's been there. And hopefully by learning from somebody who's been there, you are able to maybe not make quite so many mistakes. But being an entrepreneur is about failing. Failure is your friend, really, isn't it?
Every day. And you have to make friends with failure, because you're going to be intimate. and the last thing you want is someone like that, around you all the time. I mean, at the end of the day, you're going to fail. And, some people call it fake it till you make it. And you see that kind of concept. It shows up in the vernacular. People, say those words. And entrepreneurship is not about faking it till you make it. The concept there is that, you don't know what you need to know. And real entrepreneurs embrace that. And they go, hey, look, you know what? I don't, and I might mess up, but I'm going to own those mistakes. I am the guy, and I'm going to learn how not to make those mistakes again.
I was talking to someone. It's interesting because it has zero to do with this conversation, literally zero to do with it. But we were having a conversation about how some people accept feedback and some people don't accept feedback. And what I was saying, just if I had to zero in on what I think are qualities of people who don't accept feedback, I would say, or don't accept feedback very well. Okay, let's put it that way. It would be that maybe they're insecure and they just have a hard time hearing that they're not on top of it. Maybe they're faking it a little bit too much and they don't want to be sought out. Maybe it's just maturity. Maybe they just need to realize that feedback is what makes you better. Feedback is what makes you stronger. I always sought it. I hired people who sought it. But as an entrepreneur, if you don't like feedback, you're in serious trouble, aren't you?
At the end of the day, it's about money. And money's how we keep score, right? That is the ultimate in feedback. One of the things we learned along the way was that when we gave beer away, people always said the same thing. It was the best beer ever. They were so appreciative of it. And then when we started selling it, now they got to exchange money for that opinion. And now you actually learn very, very quickly who likes your products and who does not. And to me, that dollar is the ultimate in feedback.
Mm-hmm. The ability to overcome adversity. And we've told the long, very difficult story, but it's interesting. When I think about Hurricane Katrina, it's now been 18 years. Think about that, or soon to be 18 years. Think about that. That's unbelievable to me, because in my mind, for a lot of people who, like you and me and people of our age that were engaged in the community in the way that we were before and after Katrina, everything is kind of pre-Katrina and post-Katrina in my mind. So much of it is.
Yep.
And I think it's important, actually, we capture a lot of the lessons we learned along the way. But, okay, so 18 years. You're around 20 years old now, your company, Lazy Magnolia. So 2 years, man, you had spent 2 years of developing this company, and then you got washed away.
Yeah.
But then you came back. And then you had other challenges, and then you came back, and then you had the pandemic, and then you had to learn to turn on a dime. But I mean, we would pray that the average entrepreneur would not have to deal with that level of adversity. But boy, does it teach you, it teaches you a lot about how to stay the course, even with insurmountable adversity.
So there's a great book, American Sniper, that talks about Navy SEAL training.
Yeah, I don't know the book. Yeah.
So and it shows up in a couple of other books that talk about Navy SEAL training based on Admiral Stockdale's the Stockdale paradox. His observation was Vietnam. He was captured, Hanoi Hilton, and his observation is that pessimists, they die, and his observation is that optimists, they die later. And it's the people who simply put one foot in the other, who embrace today and simply go, hey, I will not be beat. Those are the people who will survive. And entrepreneurship weeds, it's very selective in a very similar way, right? Is that, if you don't believe you can make it, you can't make it. But if you keep hoping that tomorrow is going to be a better day and that somehow magically, right, customers are going to show up, you ain't going to make it. You've got to get down in there, you got to get dirty, and you got to figure out where the value proposition is. Right? How do you reach the people you need to reach, and how do you get them to part with their money and show you the love and support so that you can be successful?
Yeah, and it's not just them. It's not just the consumer parting with their money, but it's investors, and that's a bank involvement or whatever it might be. That's hard when you're talking about big bucks, isn't it?
I had a guy come to me one day and he said, "Man, how did you get this thing funded? I have been to like 3 banks and they all said no." And I said, "Well, that's kind of surprising, because I went to all the banks and they said no." They're like, "What do you mean?" I mean, I went to all the banks. I went to every bank on the Mississippi Gulf Coast. I walked through their doors and asked them for money, and they all said no. And he was like, "Well, that's disheartening. How do you get over that?" And I'm like, "I don't know. You just keep going, because every time you get told no, that puts you one step closer to the yes you're looking for." And the thing is that you learn every time someone tells you no, right? You ask, well, why does this not work? How does this not work for you? What are the numbers, right? You take that feedback that we talked about earlier, right? And you spin that feedback into what's the next thing that we're going to do. And I got smarter and smarter and smarter until I figured out what the banks were looking for and how to hack them effectively into giving me what I needed in order to be successful.
Whew, man. And then something so refined, especially as it relates to Log Linear Group, so refined as some innovative approaches to how you're going to use radar. And once you sort of proved yourself, like you said, man, it took a long time. It took a lot of money. But once you got that groundwork laid, then it starts to open up more opportunities after that, doesn't it?
It gets a little easier, and you develop a better network, right? And you run into other people, and as the saying goes, right? Success has many fathers, failure has but one mother, right? So if you are successful, if you've shown the tenacity, right? If you've shown the ability to plan your way through some of these challenges, right? People start to believe in you. And I mean, a great example, you look at like Elon Musk and people at that level, right? He did this little thing, right? He did PayPal, right? And people said, well, that's kind of successful. And they gave him a little bit of money so that he could do the SpaceX project. And they're about to launch the biggest rocket that has ever been built on this planet. and they're days away from launching it. And you go, I mean, how does that happen, right? I mean, he didn't have enough money to do it, but he built it up. He built a network, and people are willing to bet on people who are successful.
Yeah, Elon Musk is such a great example. What a great example. It's interesting. One of the early partners for Elon Musk with PayPal was Knight Ridder, the company that I used to work for. And there was a predecessor to PayPal. I got to try to remember what the name of it was. It's not coming back to me, but anyway, yeah, he was a smart young dude, and I mean, most of the people that I knew who engaged with him saw him as being, this unbelievable brain. And who would know that this accumulation of knowledge would continue on, and he would launch Tesla and do all of this. I believe actually on Twitter, incidentally, that he's going to figure it out. And what he's learning about Twitter, what he learned about Twitter's biases, what he's come to appreciate about free speech is all sort of playing out before our very eyes. And then, he's never seen Twitter, incidentally, as being certainly it is one of the most important news delivery tools around the world. In fact, I think it's the number one news delivery tool around the world. But he doesn't see Twitter's future being just that. He sees, that the users they brought in, that they can create some kind of a WeChat, Chinese WeChat approach, where there's a super app that has payments and all these capabilities wrapped up into this super app. And you know what, man? He did it with Tesla. He did it with SpaceX. He did it with PayPal. He's involved in these other. He's about to start his own. Of course, he's sort of the brainchild behind the AI chatbots that we're looking at today, and he's about to start his own AI. And of course, what he says about AI is scary in and of itself. But
it's an existential threat. Don't let anybody kid you. It's an existential threat. So I did this just the other day, Ricky. I said, hey, look, I asked ChatGPT, I said, hey, look, I need some code that will take this file and turn it into this data and display it for me. And it wrote the code for me. And it gave me an error, and it fixed the error. Our parents had to know had to know the information. You and I had to know where to find it. And our kids are simply going to need to know how to ask the question.
Yeah. Well, look, this whole notion of machine learning and AI, I mean, I was on to this with Elon Musk, how he thought about it based on what he'd written years ago. Anyway, we'll come back. We'll continue this part of the conversation. We'll see you after this break with Mark Henderson. I hope you've enjoyed this conversation with Mark Henderson. It's been terrific. I always enjoy spending time with Mark. When we went to break, we were actually talking about the artificial intelligence and our concerns around artificial intelligence and what most of the smart people in the world think will happen if we just, unabatedly push forward. What Elon actually pushed forward, and it was an idea, it's been several years ago, actually, that there needs to be an FAA around this kind of stuff, like we have. I mean, imagine air flight today without the FAA. The federal government ought to start caring about these things. What happens, though, unfortunately, Mark, and you've seen this over and over again, whether it's a discussion about how Facebook uses AI or whatever it might be, a discussion in Congress about Twitter, that they really don't have the capabilities to even understand the depth of technology that they need to understand in order to get this done. I do think they're having more serious conversations about it, incidentally, than they've ever had before, because they're realizing with the new AI that's being launched now, they better get on board and they better get staff to get these issues, because if we just let it go unabatedly, it's not good, man. It's not good. So you were saying during break you've been experimenting some.
Yeah, absolutely. I've engaged with ChatGPT, writing code and doing those kinds of things. And right now, I'd still tell you, it's very much a tool. It has knowledge that I could absolutely go have. It just has it more closely at its fingertips. And that's pretty powerful all by itself. I mean, it's got some understanding of, how things fit together. Now, that I would tell you, it's still rudimentary. But the distance that we have come in 10 years and how fast it's accelerating, where it's going to be, And I think you're absolutely correct, right? So for, if you think about the medical side of the community, right, we have ethics boards, right, that review things and go, yeah, we probably should not be cloning children, right?
Yeah.
There's some things that we probably should not do. And, capitalism doesn't have those constraints. It is us as a society. We have to collectively come together and go, no, we're not going to do that. And, put in the protections to make sure that doesn't happen. Now then, it has the potential to be amazingly good for all of us, and it has the potential to be an absolute disaster.
It is right. It could be. I think about just we think about cybersecurity and how Chinese, let's say, this seems to be our biggest worldwide concern these days, but how they could use AI as their own sort of technology nuclear bomb inside America. I mean, and just shut it all down. I mean, of course, that's actually possible sooner than later.
I mean, there's no doubt about it. I mean, the existential threat here is, we have the lizard part of our brain, right? And it communicates with us through hormones, right? It communicates to us with adrenaline and with oxytocin and serotonin and things of that nature, right? And we've got our higher level brain functions that sit on top of that. And we think we're in control. But, if I starve you of water for 3 days, right, you'll do anything in the world to go get it. And so we're not as in control as we like to think we are. And, if you imagine a higher level intelligence that we cannot communicate with, that sits, one level above us, it's going to treat us just like the lizard part of its brain. And it's not necessarily going to be pretty. And the things that it can contemplate and think of, if it's, not ethically bounded, right, is killing people bad? If it serves a greater good, maybe not. And we certainly don't. We got to be conscious of that for sure.
It's some scary stuff. You think about, again, rudimentary, but again, artificial intelligence is what's been used to determine our news feeds, and you think about how effective that they have been, and making sure they feed us the sort of news feeds that you and I have talked about in past shows that crank us up and create conflict between us, and therefore there's more engagement, and Facebook makes more money and all this stuff because they're playing those cards right. Someone had to program that, but once they programmed it, it just kind of ran with it, on its own. And again, that's part of the problem here. We don't even know that code's not there for us to see. Yep. One of the beauties of what Elon Musk has done, whether people like it or not, is that he is diving in and with intellectual honesty saying what he's seeing, and what he's seeing isn't pretty. And eventually I think he'll eventually make a lot of that code available so that people can see that there's an effort inside Twitter to create balance and not let it lean one way or the other. That's so dangerous in a democratic society. And I guess if they're leaning it towards you, you don't have a problem with it. And if they're leaning against you, you got a big problem with it. But that shouldn't be a conversation that we're having as a democracy, should it?
No, it's not. And I think a lot of people, they lose sight of this, right? Is that if you've got a stick that can beat someone else, at some point that stick might beat you. And, our goal should always be to set this up in such a way that freedom is just kind of inherently baked into the system.
We need democracy. We need democracy, which is we need an equal number of people on both sides having public conversations that will make this country better.
That's right.
And not being, poked by some artificial intelligence that wants us to have conflict because these social media companies can make more money. Hey, this was a fun conversation. Congratulations on writing your column. You'll be able to read Mark by going to supertalk.fm. Sign up for the app and also the newsletter to be delivered directly to your door. Anyway, it's been a pleasure, my friend.
Always a pleasure, Ricky. Thanks for having me on.
You bet. Have a great day, and we will see you tomorrow.